My name is Claire, and for the last 10 years, I was the only person in my family who showed up. Not for holidays. Not for photos. For everything. The 2 a.m. calls when Grandma Eleanor fell in the bathroom. The chemo appointments. The grocery runs in snowstorms because she refused to let strangers into her house. While my brother Mark was building his real estate empire 3 states away and my sister Sarah was posting yoga retreat photos from Bali, I was the one sitting beside a hospital bed in Eleanor Whitfield's drafty old farmhouse, holding her hand while machines beeped out the rhythm of her failing heart. She died on a Tuesday morning in March, with sunlight cutting thin lines across her bedspread and my hand still wrapped around hers. I'd like to tell you it was peaceful. It was. For her. For me, it felt like the floor of my life had been pulled away. The funeral was small the way she wanted it. A handful of neighbors, her old church friends, the postman who'd known her for 20 years. Mark and Sarah flew in 2 days before, dressed in black that looked more expensive than anything Grandma had owned in her life. They cried at the right moments. They hugged the right people. They looked, for all the world, like grieving children. I should have known something was wrong when Mark kept stepping outside to take phone calls during the wake. Work stuff, he told me, sliding his phone into his blazer pocket with a little too much speed. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was. I hadn't had a work call in years that didn't involve coordinating Grandma's physical therapy schedule. After the burial, we drove back to Maple Hollow, Eleanor's 120-acre property out past the reservoir, the house she'd inherited from her own mother, the orchards she used to walk every morning before her hip gave out. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. Family, finally together, mourning the woman who raised half of us in one way or another. Instead, less than 24 hours after we lowered her into the ground, I walked into the driveway to find a moving truck idling by the porch and a man in a polo shirt hammering a wooden stake into Grandma's rose bed. The sign on the stake read, "For sale, Voss Premier Realty." I stood there with my car keys still in my hand, staring at that sign like it was written in a language I didn't speak. Claire. Sarah's voice rang out from the porch, bright and easy, like she was calling me in for lemonade. Perfect timing. Derek was just about to do the walkthrough. The man with the hammer, Derek, apparently, straightened up and gave me a smile that belonged on a used car lot. You must be the third sibling, he said, like I was a footnote in a deal that had already been signed. There's no third sibling, I said slowly. There's just me. I'm the one who actually lived here. Mark came down the porch steps with a clipboard tucked under his arm, the same easy confidence he used to flash before basketball games in high school, right before he'd missed the shot and blamed the ref. Claire, don't make this weird. We're just getting ahead of things. The market in this part of the Hudson Valley is insane right now. Derek says a property like this, with the acreage, could go for $2.5, maybe $3 million if we move fast. $3 million. Less than a day after the funeral. With dirt from Grandma's grave probably still under his nice leather shoes. The will hasn't even been read, I said. We don't have probate. We don't have anything. You can't put a for sale sign on a house that isn't legally yours yet. Sarah waved a hand, the gesture of someone swatting away a fly. Mark found Grandma's will in her desk. She left the house to both of us. You're not even on it, sweetie, which, honestly, I think she just forgot, with everything going on at the end. But we figured we'd let you stay involved. Out of respect. Out of respect. The words landed in my chest like a slap. I looked past her, into the house I had spent 10 years keeping warm, keeping clean, keeping alive, and I saw moving boxes already stacked in the front hall. I saw a man I'd never met running his hand along Grandma's antique mahogany sideboard like he was pricing a used car. Something in me went very still and very cold. Show me this will, I said. Mark hesitated for just a fraction of a second too long. It's at the lawyer's office. We'll get you a copy. That hesitation told me everything. Whatever document they were waving around, it wasn't sitting safely with an attorney. And whatever was about to happen at Maple Hollow over the next few weeks was not going to be about grief. It was going to be about greed. And I was the only one standing in its way. By the next morning, the house didn't feel like Grandma's anymore. Little yellow stickers had sprouted overnight on every surface that mattered. The grandfather clock in the hallway that Grandma's father had carried over from Ireland, the hand-carved dining set she and Grandpa had bought on their honeymoon, even the porcelain tea set she only used on Christmas morning. Each sticker had a single word printed on it in block letters. Sold. I picked one off the tea set and turned it over in my fingers like it might explain itself. "You can't just sell her things," I said, finding Sarah in the kitchen, sipping coffee out of Grandma's favorite mug like she hadn't a care in the world. "These aren't yours to sell. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Claire." Sarah set the mug down with the kind of patience you'd use on a child having a tantrum. "I know this is hard for you. You are here every day, I get it, and that's really sweet, actually. But Grandma's gone. Someone has to be practical. Mark's already got 3 buyers lined up for the antiques alone." 3 buyers? It's been 2 days. Mark works fast. I left the kitchen before I said something I couldn't take back, and went looking for the one place in that house that had always belonged only to Grandma, her library, at the back of the East Wing, where she used to sit with her reading glasses pushed up into her white hair, sorting through decades of letters and photographs. It was there, tucked behind a row of gardening almanacs, that I found her diary. The leather cover was cracked with age, the pages soft and yellowed. I almost put it back. It felt like trespassing, even now, even with her gone. But something made me open it to the last few entries, dated only weeks before she died. March 2nd. Mark called today. First time in 8 months. Asked about the house, not about me. I think he believes I don't notice things like that anymore. I notice everything. March 9th. Sarah sent flowers. No card. The florist must have forgotten. Or she did. Either way, it's the thought that should have counted, and there wasn't one. March 14th. Claire sat with me again tonight until I fell asleep. She doesn't know I saw her crying in the hallway when she thought I was resting. That girl has given me more than either of the others combined, and they don't even see it. I've made arrangements. They won't understand right away, but they will. I read that last line 3 times. I've made arrangements. What arrangements? The will Mark and Sarah were waving around like a winning lottery ticket clearly wasn't whatever Grandma was talking about. I flipped further back, hunting for more, but the entries stopped there. The rest of the pages blank, as if she'd run out of time before she could finish whatever she was planning to write next. I needed answers, and I needed them from someone outside this house. The next morning, I drove 40 minutes into town to the small brick office of Sterling and Crane, attorneys at law, the firm Grandma had used for the last 15 years for everything from her property taxes to her advance medical directive. Margaret Sterling, the firm's senior partner, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who had known Grandma since before I was born. She listened to my story without interrupting once, her expression growing tighter with every sentence. "There is no will on file here naming Mark or Sarah as sole beneficiaries," she said finally, pulling up something on her computer screen. "Your grandmother's most recent estate planning documents were filed with this office 8 months ago. I can't disclose contents to you before the formal reading, Claire. That's not how this works, even for family. But I can tell you this. Whatever document your siblings are holding did not come from me." My stomach dropped. "Then where did it come from?" "That," Margaret said, folding her hands on the desk, "is a very good question. And if your brother and sister are attempting to act on a document that isn't legally recognized before probate has even been opened with the county, they are putting themselves in a very dangerous legal position. New York is what's called an intestate state when there's no valid will, meaning if a court ever determined there was no enforceable document, the estate would be divided strictly according to state law, between all surviving heirs equally, not according to whatever piece of paper your brother printed off at a hotel business center." I sat with that for a long moment. Mark and Sarah weren't just being cruel. They were potentially committing fraud, tampering with an estate before probate, forging or misrepresenting documents, selling property and possessions that legally belonged to no one yet because the court hadn't even opened the case. "What do I do?" I asked. Margaret's eyes softened, just slightly. "You protect the property. Document everything. Photograph every item they try to remove. And you wait for the official reading, which I will be scheduling the moment probate opens sooner if I have anything to say about it. She paused. Claire, were you aware your grandmother had a security company install cameras throughout the house and grounds last autumn? I blinked. No, I had no idea. She mentioned it to me in passing, Margaret said. Said something about wanting to know who really came to visit and who didn't. A faint, sad smile crossed her face. Your grandmother was a great deal smarter than people gave her credit for. I drove back to Maple Hollow that afternoon with my heart pounding and my hands tight on the wheel, the diary on the passenger seat beside me like a loaded weapon I didn't yet know how to use. Here's what I want to ask you if you've made it this far in the story. Do you think people who show up only after someone has passed, who never visited, never called, never lifted a finger to help, deserve an equal share of what's left behind? Drop your honest answer in the comments below, because what happens next is going to make you furious. I should have known better than to leave the house unattended, even for an afternoon. When I pulled back into the long gravel drive at Maple Hollow, my stomach turned to ice. The front lawn looked like a flea market had exploded across it. Folding tables lined the grass, draped with white cloths, and on top of them sat Grandma's china, her silverware, her crocheted blankets, and, I realized with a jolt of disbelief, several boxes of my own things. My winter coat, the framed photo of me and Grandma at my college graduation, a jewelry box my mother had given me before she passed years earlier. A small crowd of strangers wandered between the tables, picking up heirlooms like they were browsing a yard sale, while Sarah stood near a cash box, smiling and chatting like she was hosting a garden party. What is this? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Sarah turned, not even a flicker of guilt crossing her face. Estate sale. Mark thought it'd be smart to liquidate some of the smaller stuff before the bigger sale closes. Cuts down on moving costs. That's my coat, Sarah. That's my graduation photo. Those are my things, not Grandma's, and definitely not yours to sell. She shrugged, the kind of shrug that told me she'd thought about this and decided she simply didn't care. Everything in this house is part of the estate until probate sorts it out. You said so yourself, right? Isn't that what your lawyer friend told you? I felt heat rise up my neck, but I didn't have time to argue, because that's when I noticed Mark wasn't there, and a folder of paperwork that had been sitting on the hall table that morning was gone. I didn't wait to find out where he was. I went straight to the one place in the house I hadn't fully searched, Grandma's library. It was the room she'd loved most, lined floor to ceiling with books, anchored by an enormous oil painting of the Hudson River that had hung above the fireplace for as long as I could remember. I don't know what made me look behind it that day. Maybe it was the diary entry, "I've made arrangements," echoing in my head, but I lifted the heavy frame away from the wall, and behind it was a small steel safe, its dial worn smooth from years of use. My hands were shaking as I tried the combination I knew best, Grandma's wedding anniversary, the date she repeated to me every year like a prayer. The dial clicked. The door swung open. Inside, there was no cash, no jewelry, nothing I expected. Just two things: a sealed legal envelope marked second deed, Maple Hollow property, and a small USB drive with a single word written on a strip of masking tape. Claire. I sat down on the library floor right there and plugged the drive into my laptop, my pulse hammering in my ears. Grandma's face filled the screen, thinner than I remembered, but her eyes were just as sharp, just as alive as ever. She was sitting in this very library, in the chair by the window, speaking directly into the camera like she somehow already knew exactly when I'd be watching. Claire, sweetheart, if you're seeing this, then I'm gone, and your brother and sister have probably already tried something foolish. I love them. I do. But love doesn't make you blind, and I have eyes everywhere in this house. You'll understand that soon enough. She paused, folding her hands the way she always did before saying something important. What most people don't know is that Maple Hollow isn't just a house and some orchard land. 15 years ago, I quietly purchased the mineral and development rights beneath the eastern 40 acres, the parcel that backs up to the new county reservoir expansion. There's a development consortium that has been trying to buy this land for the better part of 3 years for a resort and conference complex. Their last offer, before I told them to wait, was $11 million. 11.
million.
I never told Mark or Sarah because I knew exactly what they'd do with that information, and apparently I was right, given that you're watching this. The deed in that envelope is the real one, drawn up and witnessed 8 months ago at Sterling and Crane's office. It includes something your siblings won't like, a morality clause. If either of them attempts to sell, transfer, or liquidate any part of this estate before the will is formally read in probate court, they forfeit their inheritance entirely, down to $1. I had it written that way on purpose, Claire. I wanted to see who would wait and who couldn't. She smiled then, soft and a little sad. You waited 10 years for me without ever once asking what was in it for you. That's all the answer I needed. The video ended. I sat there on the floor of that library for a long time, the laptop screen gone dark, my whole understanding of the last 2 weeks rearranging itself in my mind. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about $11 million sitting under land that Mark and Sarah were trying to sell off in pieces, completely unaware of what they were standing on, and a legal trap their own grandmother had built specifically to catch them in the act. I picked up my phone and called Margaret Sterling. I found the real deed, I said, and I think I know exactly what Grandma was planning. There was a pause on the line, and then Margaret's voice came back, low and steady. Claire, listen to me carefully. Don't confront them yet. Get back to that estate sale, photograph everything being sold, get names of buyers if you can, and call me the moment it's done. We're going to do this exactly by the book, because if your grandmother set this trap as carefully as it sounds, the very best thing you can do right now is let your brother and sister keep digging their own hole. 3 days later, I drove back to Maple Hollow with Margaret Sterling beside me and 2 patrol cars from the county sheriff's office following behind. Mark and Sarah hadn't slowed down at all in my absence. If anything, they'd sped up. A new sign had gone up at the end of the driveway, bigger than the first, announcing an estate liquidation auction the following weekend. Derek Voss's name was plastered across it in bold red letters, alongside a phone number and the words motivated sellers. Mark met us on the porch with his arms crossed, the same easy smirk he'd worn since we were kids, the look of someone who has never once believed the rules applied to him. Claire, seriously, what is this? Cops? You're really going to make a scene at Grandma's house. This is Grandma's house, I said. That's exactly the point. Sarah came out behind him, phone already raised like she was preparing to film me for some imagined victim narrative. We have a will. We have every right to manage this estate. You're the one who's not even named in it. Margaret stepped forward, calm as still water, and that calm seemed to unsettle Mark far more than my anger ever could. I'm afraid the document you're referring to has never been filed with this office, and as of this morning, it has been formally reported to the county as a potentially fraudulent estate document. I'd strongly advise you both to stop speaking until you've consulted independent counsel. This is insane, Mark snapped. We found Grandma's will in her own desk drawer. It names us. It's dated. It's signed. It's also, Margaret said evenly, not the most recent legally executed will for Eleanor Whitfield's estate, which I drafted, witnessed, and filed 8 months ago, along with a secondary deed covering an additional parcel of this property neither of you appear to be aware of. I watched something flicker across Mark's face, the first real crack of doubt I'd seen since the funeral. What additional parcel? Sarah asked, lowering her phone slightly. That's when one of the deputies stepped forward with a folder of his own. We've also received documentation from a private security firm, he said, regarding several cameras installed on this property roughly 8 months ago, at the request of the homeowner. Cameras which recorded both of you removing and selling personal property belonging to a third party prior to the legal opening of probate. Mark's jaw tightened. Those cameras are insane. That's invasion of privacy. They're on a property that was, at the time of installation, legally and entirely your grandmother's to monitor as she saw fit, Margaret said. And now, as part of this estate, the footage is admissible in any probate dispute regarding mismanagement or fraud. I stepped forward then, holding the diary in one hand and the sealed envelope from the safe in the other. There's something else you both need to see. We gathered in the library, the same room where I'd found the safe, the same chair where Grandma had recorded her message. Margaret formally opened the sealed envelope in front of everyone, the deputies as witnesses, and read the real will aloud for the first time. It named all three of us as heirs, in equal standing, exactly as the intestate law would have done anyway, with one critical, devastating addition: the morality clause. In the event that any named heir attempts to sell, liquidate, transfer, or otherwise dispose of any portion of the Maple Hollow estate, real property, mineral or development rights, or personal belongings contained therein, prior to the formal probate reading of this last will and testament, that heirs' inheritance under this document shall be immediately and irrevocably reduced to the sum of $1, with their forfeited share to be redistributed equally among the remaining compliant heirs. The silence in that library was the loudest thing I had ever heard. "You're joking," Sarah whispered. "She wouldn't. She loved us." "She did love you," I said quietly. "That's exactly why she gave you the chance to prove it, and exactly why she made sure there'd be proof either way." Margaret closed the folder. "There's a final matter you should both be aware of," she added. "The eastern 40 acres of this property hold a previously undisclosed mineral and development rights agreement valued, per an appraisal commissioned by your grandmother, at approximately $11 million. Under the terms of this will, that value would have been split 3 ways among compliant heirs." I watched the number land on both of their faces like a physical blow. $11 million, split 3 ways, nearly $3.7 million each, gone, reduced to $1 apiece, because they couldn't wait 3 weeks to be decent. That's when Derek Voss, the so-called real estate agent, made his second mistake of the day. He tried to leave through the back door with a briefcase that, it turned out, contained over $40,000 in cash deposits collected from the illegal estate sale, money that had never been reported, never been held in any legitimate escrow, and that the deputies were more than happy to seize on the spot, along with Mr. Voss himself, whose real estate license, they later discovered, had been suspended in 2 other states for nearly identical schemes. I want to tell you that watching Mark and Sarah escorted off the property felt like victory. Honestly, it felt more like grief, just a different shape of it. Mark didn't go quietly. He screamed about lawyers, about appeals, about how none of this was fair, as if fairness was something he'd ever extended to anyone else in his life. Sarah cried, real tears this time, finally understanding what it meant to lose something irreplaceable, even if what she lost was mostly money. Derek Voss was arrested on the spot, his fraudulent business practices unraveling in real time as deputies found records of similar schemes targeting grieving families in 2 other counties. The formal probate reading took place 2 weeks later, in Margaret Sterling's quiet office, with the county judge's blessing already secured for the validity of Grandma's true will. Mark and Sarah's shares were reduced exactly as the morality clause demanded, $1 each, payable on request, a number so small it felt almost merciful compared to what they could have had. But the story doesn't end with punishment. It ends with what Grandma actually wanted. Buried in the final pages of the real will was her true plan for Maple Hollow. Not a resort, not a payout, but a sanctuary. She'd quietly negotiated with a development consortium for a different kind of deal. They'd build their resort on a smaller adjoining parcel she no longer needed, and in exchange, the historic farmhouse, the orchards, and the surrounding acreage would be converted into a non-profit retreat for family caregivers, exhausted, overlooked people just like I had been, given a place to rest free of charge, funded in perpetuity by the development proceeds. And she'd named me as the estate's executor and director, with a salary that, for the first time in 10 years, meant I didn't have to choose between caring for someone I loved and paying my own bills. I stood on the porch of Maple Hollow the evening everything was finalized, looking out over the orchard Grandma used to walk every morning, and I finally understood what she'd been trying to teach all 3 of us, in her own quiet, deliberate way. Greed doesn't just cost you money. It costs you the people who would have given you everything if you'd only been willing to wait, to show up, to mean it. Love, it turns out, really is the only inheritance that can't be liquidated, sold, or stolen out from under you in the middle of the night. If this story made you angry, made you cry, or made you think of someone in your own life, the one who always shows up or the ones who never do, let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice finally being served, Subscribe for more daily drama stories because trust me, this family isn't the only one with secrets buried behind a painting.